All right, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and this is the end of day recap for what's today? Today's Tuesday, right? Tuesday. Yes, it kind of feels like Wednesday, but it is Tuesday. And so just have in front of us, as I always start with kind of the overall move in the market and the S&P Qs and small caps is usually what I focus on. And the one thing that I noticed this morning, and this is what we go over every morning pre-market in the trading room. One of the things that I noticed was that Asian markets did fine overnight. They had a nice little bid to them. The Hang Seng was up decently. I think it was up about 60 basis points. But Europe was actually kind of flat to down a little bit this morning by the time our markets opened. And this has happened a couple times now, so I'll repeat this. I mentioned this several times during the day as well. Is that you really have to be mindful of what kind of market we're in right now in terms of if we rally into the open. So it is kind of puzzling to me. If you look at the Nasdaq, for example, was up about Nasdaq futures were up about 20 basis points pre-market, which didn't make a lot of sense to me. It was kind of the same thing that happened yesterday. And we're just not in that type of market. If Europe was up about a 0.5% or if they were up 1%, I would say, oh, great, we're going to have a big rally today. But, with global markets kind of just, choppy and Europe down a little bit, it didn't make sense to me. I was actually saying, stop, whoever's pumping up the futures pre-market, there's no reason to be doing that. And you could see, so I don't know who these guys are, guys or girls who are doing this, but to have this rally into the open, it's just silly. So I didn't really do much trading in the first hour or two. It's kind of the same thing as yesterday. Sat on my hands. I was looking for some setups, but we can kind of see what happened to the Fang stocks this morning, which I'm not going to really focus on these because there's a lot of other things that were going on. But Amazon, for example, a name that's been acting pretty well lately, just right on the open, it gets sold off from down from 996 to 982. So very quick, very very quick move down. And again, I don't know why some things are getting bid up pre-market, but the moral of the story is don't chase. If you start to see things, if Europe is not, if globally, we have clues when we come into the morning. And if those things are, if those areas of the world globally are not up a 0.5% to 1%, there's no reason to chase something, our markets that are up 25, 30 basis points going into the open. It's ridiculous. We're just not, our markets right now are overbought, so there's no reason to chase. We did burn off maybe a little bit of those overbought levels today. I would rather, listen, you can't have everything that you want, clearly in trading, but we're still overbought here. The S&P actually finished up 22 basis points, so we're still overbought. So, I keep kind of waiting. I'm sitting long positions, but I've also got a couple hedges on. Like I've got a short call spread in IWM because we're sitting with a very overbought level here, and it's kind of like, hey, let this market come in a little bit rather than chop around. So we've had kind of two choppy days to deal with so far for the week. I don't know if we're going to get much more else out of this week unless we have maybe just show a little bit of volatility. The VIX started to move up today and then got smacked. It ended down on the day. So, it was up to about a 1060 today, ended at a 10, basically a 10 handle. The VXN, which is the VIX for the Qs, actually ended up a little bit today. So a little bit more well bid, I would say, that that VIX, the VIX for the Qs. Again, I think it's good to look at these side by side and not just look at the VIX alone. But yeah, I mean, so it's kind of a wasted day, I would say, in terms of price action because we had a little bit of volatility, but then we came back, but we didn't really rally at the end of the day. So, you know, it is what it is. We can't make it any better than the day's action. So where it really gets interesting is in today's option activity, you can see I have a whole, I'm actually running off a page, and I actually have to weed out names because I don't really like to spill over, uh, option activity into two pages. But man, there was a lot of call buying. There was a lot of really good signals today. They just didn't really act that well. So it's kind of I've in the last couple of videos that I've shot, I've talked about how some names from last week, you could actually get into them cheaper. And I gave this example the other day, but I'll give it again. XBI, we saw this colossal call buyer last week, towards the end of last week. 29,000 of the XBI November 90 calls for 206. I think those are marking now at like $1.30 or $1.40. So you have to put these things in reference. And, it's how we separate ourselves at the Tribeca Trade Group. We're not just blindly following trades, which I know a lot of other uh, a lot of other trading rooms do. They just basically will follow whatever's on the tape. We don't do that. We take a look at where things are, what the path of things have, because XBI is a perfect example. Where I wasn't going to pay $2 for something that's overbought, but I like this sector, and that's why I keep bringing it up. Because I think it's going to be a trade that I enter into, or at least take a long position in XBI. It may not be the November 90s, but yeah, I mean, you could pay about 30-40% cheaper than what this trade went up on the tape. So, and we're seeing this over and over. So today I'll start going through some of today's trades, and I did not take every trade here today, but there's some really good ones. So to start off with the beginning of the day, there was some chatter on JCI. This worked really well. I did not take this. A couple traders took it in the trading room today. Great job. Was up a little bit more than where it closed, and I think they took 2 or 3 targets off in this trade. This one I really like, and this is interesting. This is JD.com, and it's had a little bit of pain here for a lot of September, but it's been basing here, and you can see it kind of turn the corner here a little bit. So it did stick inside right at the bottom of value. There was 2 levels that I was watching today. So it made some nice progress in the morning, and then it had some nice follow through in the afternoon. So for the week, as long as we're above 39.81, I think you can be long here. And again, we've seen repeat call buying in this name whenever there's a dip, whenever this name's down like 1% or 1.5%, buyers come right back into this name. So what I would be watching for is looks like we just barely closed inside value. So I would say 1410 is what you want to be cognizant of. And then, if we get one more up day, which I'm hoping for tomorrow, we should have a nice MACD bull crossover as well. That should be developing very, very soon if we get a little follow through tomorrow. So real nice call buying in JD. We are in this trade. There's October. There's some further out trades in JD. And keep in mind, this has been a repeat offender of call activity. So we've seen some Novembers and Decembers. Saw a little bit of Coach this morning, a little bit of Costco, Caesars. Some of this was labeled as a spread, some of it wasn't. But at the end of the day, it was 37,000 contracts going up. So another gaming name, and that kind of leads me to sometimes when these trades are so large, it's interesting how many of these, it almost feels like they've got something else going on concerning some of this trade was labeled as a spread in the afternoon. But I waited, and again, like I said, I don't just blindly follow. I'm waiting for a little bit of confirmation here in Caesars, and I didn't get it. I was looking for a break basically above 1280, so no trade for this one. And I have that alert set for tomorrow. Again, I'll wait to see that the stock is actually turning before I kind of just jump into the name. But you can see the biggest print towards the end of the day was marked as a spread of the 17,000. Now the other gaming name, this was more interesting to me. This is Boyd Gaming. You could actually see that the name got a little bit of a bid because everybody, starts talking about it on Twitter, and a little bit of extra volume, so caused this to move up. But take a look at the daily chart. This thing has been kind of grinding higher for most of the year. It's actually been on a nice run, actually grinding for the last couple months, but since the beginning of the year, it's up nicely from $20 to 27. It's had a real nice candle back on 10.5, and it's been consolidating a little bit, but it kind of reminds me this name. Now, granted, this is the first trade that we've seen in Boyd Gaming. They manage casinos in various different states. I don't know if they do Las Vegas, but they do some of the other states that have recently had cropped up with casinos. But there's 7,000 December 30 calls. Now this is about 9 or 10%. The strike price is about 9 or 10% away from the current price. What this reminds me of is another name that we saw call buying in, which was IGT. If you remember the first calls that went up in IGT, they were about the same amount away, about 8 to 10% away out of the money. So I'm not going to say that we're gonna get the same results as what we saw when we saw those IGT calls go up, but it looks similar. There's some similarities between this order and Boyd and what we started to see in IGT. What we also started to see, in IGT, just so there's no confusion, is repeat activity. We haven't seen that yet in Boyd, so that's something that I would keep on your radar if you're not in this trade already. So again, upside move, and again, remember the IGT. I didn't really like. I did go into IGT, but I didn't really like the trade. I didn't really like the technicals. The price was way below the 200-day moving average when they started buying those calls. I do like this chart in Boyd, so we'll see what this does tomorrow. So, for example, what we do in the room is if we start to see that repeat activity come in, we have that frame of reference, and I can jump right into it, considering that somebody's coming back in and buying it. But I think there's definitely some similarities between what we saw when the IGT call buying started. All right, so that's a couple trades there. A couple of little biotech orders. Some of these names may have some announcements. ACAD had some call buying. There was another one in here which I may not have on the list, but I think it was. Let me see if I can find it. I think it was TXMD. I want to see TGTX. TGTX. Another just a small order. Under 1,000 contracts, but it looks like somebody was buying these sweep. A couple sweeps on these transactions. These were the October 12th, so some short dated options. I know some people have trafficked into that name before. Here I have it right here. October 12 calls. So there was a little bit of call buying in some of these small cap biotech names. Biotech again was one of the worst performers of the day, but it did come back at the end of the day. So I think that's a pretty good positive. You could see there's actually a green bar, but yeah, I mean, right around 12:30, this hit a low for the day and grinded back. A couple other names, so really in the afternoon is where things really picked up in terms of option activity. We saw a lot of Caterpillar calls. I saw some Caterpillar October 125s go up aggressively in the morning. I mean, these are really short dated stuff. So this is something you can put on your watch list, but they're buying calls that expire in, just about a week and a half away. So you have to kind of bear that in mind. We saw something like that with a couple other names. I want to say there's one other trade that caught my. There were some UPS calls that were weeklies. There were some Nvidia calls that went up at the end of the day that were weeklies as well. So really short-term stuff. How we handle these is we kind of look at them for setup for maybe a day trade for tomorrow, because unless the call value is really low, I don't really want to mess with holding a position that's going to expire in about a week, any more than maybe a day or two. It gets just too risky, in my opinion. Prudential, they came in with a nice block of Prudential. Prudential's basically back. There's 11,000 of these, so they actually came in for more. I think I only have 4,000 written down. Yeah, there was 4,000, and then I guess some more that came in. So all in all, 11,000 of Prudential calls. You look at this chart. It was up nicely today. It's actually quietly been on a nice run. Remember back here, this is when the hurricanes, when all the insurance names really broke down, and then they fired back to the upside, just like the banks. So Prudential, if you really want to look at it from a positive aspect, it's not it's basically back to where it was pre-hurricanes, in the beginning of August. So while it's been on a nice run, it's certainly not extended from where it was earlier in the year. Then a couple other really interesting trades. I don't know what they're doing here in J&J. Take a look at all the contracts that traded. These are November 135 calls, 21,000. And there wasn't one print. I guess there was some prints that went up on the bid side. I mean, it could be that they're selling calls, an opening seller of some calls here, but I think the technicals look okay in J&J. I mean, there's a lot of prints that were swept for like 200, 300 contracts. So believe it or not, they got up to 21,000 contracts. So that was sneaky. There's also a couple other sneaky guys in here. Hilton, another trade where there's no prints over 500 contracts, but these hotels, my goodness, they've been really on fire. Marriott has been a name where we've seen repeat call activity, especially today. That's MAR. I do have my own lodging index that I set up because there's no lodging ETF. Take a look at this group. This dipped for a little while underneath the 50-day moving average. Again, this is an index that I set up, and you could see the components of it if I can find it. There it is. So you could see, let's just put this into weighting mode so you can see the weights. It's an equally weighted basket that I made. So all the names, HLT, ILG, which we saw call buying on Friday, Marriott's in here, Wyndham is in here as well. And again, if you look at the price action, these things are breaking out again. I mean, they dipped back in the beginning of August, which I think was also around hurricane time. Some of these hotels came in a little bit, but this is a 52-week high on this index. So really, Hilton was the name today, but Marriott, they continue to go after Marriott, and this thing has been one of the best performers in the group. 52-week high today, and it's been aggressive trades that have been going up in Marriott. A couple other trades just to run through. Again, this is a longer than normal video, but I mean, there's just a lot of activity. It'll be really interesting to see how the rest of the week sets up with all this paper that's been going into some of these names. And again, these are the aggressive trades. These are not just the blocks. Just a couple other names. EA, there's a dip buyer, November 115 calls in that name. So looks like I got that name on here twice, which is good. I could take that off. PXD, there was also energy buying. This tape is kind of puzzling. It's been underneath the 200-day moving average. It looks like a horrible chart to me, but they've been buying calls, sizable calls, in this name from time to time. I like this chart better. I did take this trade today. This is Oxy. Why do I like this better? Because it's over the 200-day moving average. You know exactly where your stop is, which coincides with the top of value 62.97. So that's Oxy. With oil moving up, just a couple other charts to look at besides today's option activity. Oil trying to get back to the 200-day moving average. Really nice. I mean, all the commodities were strong today, I think because of the weaker dollar. Look at copper today. Copper was up. If you want to look at the whole base metals group, 52-week high today in the base metals group. This ETF is copper, zinc, and aluminum. So really strong, which brings me to my next option trade and final option trade, CMC. This is a metals company. I don't know if they have everything to do with those particular metals, but nice call buying in this name, just below the 200-day moving average, but they went after this one a couple times aggressively. You could see 13 times. Don't let this fool you. 13 times unusual, 13 times usual volume. Sometimes sometimes names just don't see option activity. So when somebody says like, "Oh, it traded 15 times normal call activity today," well, keep in mind some of these names, they just don't have call buyers in them every day. And it's, the total was, so I like this trade. I'm not trying to discount it, but 1,700 contracts is not the biggest trade in the world. However, it was put up aggressively, and I think it's an interesting looking chart and an interesting sector. Those are the November 18 calls. So I'll leave it there for the day. Have a great night, and I'll see you guys back in the trading room in TribecaTradeGroup.com is where you can check us out. Thanks very much. Have a great night.